Welcome to the LTGuitarist Interviews podcast. My name is Liam. You might know me better as LTGuitarist. I've interviewed some really interesting people over the years from the world of music, YouTube, and other creative fields. And I wanted to re-release these interviews as a podcast because, well, basically it's been 7 years and I've become a better editor. Today I'm talking to Martin Keary, who you might know as Tantacrul. I think you can call him a music technology critic, but he'll make videos about all sorts of really interesting issues, usually around music, but sometimes around the internet and quite often around user interfaces. So if you want to get really nerdy about user interfaces, Tantacrul is the place to go. This interview took place on a very hot day in 2019. If you're watching the video version, you will notice that I am very poorly lit because I didn't want any more sources of heat in my studio. Since this interview, I've become fairly friendly with Martin, and we talk over email quite often, and we meet up for a drink maybe once a year. Something I've learned about him is that we can just talk for hours and really lose track of time, which is why this interview is a two-parter. Part 2 will be available next week at the usual time.
As far as I'm concerned, the channel is doing its job when I'm discussing music in some form. But for me, that could be structure, could be harmony. But because I'm also a visual artist and a designer, it's turned to things like notation software. And it's going to turn to things like visuals and music and how visuals combine nicely with music and stuff like that. So I kind of feel like as long as I'm talking about sound or music in some shape or form, that fits into the channel. And I like to do it in a kind of a entertaining way, and I also like to throw in what I think is an original way or a semi-original way of communicating the ideas, I suppose you might say. I'm just reaching forward for my tea. That's about as good as I think I'm going to do. So there you go. That's my channel.
The thing that appeals to me about your channel and your content and your delivery is how relentlessly brutal you are about things that annoy you, or things that are poorly designed, or things you just, for whatever reason, do not like. With YouTube in particular, a lot of the delivery is this kind of exhausting enthusiasm that just, as a Brit, does my head in. So when I see people presenting stuff in a kind of more relaxed but massively sarcastic way like yourself, David Bruce is much the same, and I'd actually say Adam Neely's style of presentation is very British because it's not that crazy, hey guys, smash the like button, whatever.
He won't cover music he doesn't like, and if he does, well, maybe that. I mean, I assume he doesn't. That's what I believe about him, and that's what I believe about David Bruce as well. That those guys, they want to push the stuff that they're interested in.
Yeah.
And they'll just quietly ignore the things that they think are crap. And now I know both those guys can go for it, especially Adam can go for it with like the A equals 432, which I loved. Which I'm incredibly irritated about because I was in the middle of writing a equals 432 video myself.
Yeah, of course you were.
And then that came. Yeah, like it was just after the Sonification one. I was obviously going to do something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that aside, yeah, I agree with you on that, and I do agree with you that there are some irritatingly saccharine, I guess I'd say channels that are trying to maximize the amount of hits they get from the algorithm by just mentioning the right popular name. Oh, hey, I keep thinking Britney Spears, but when is Britney Spears popular? It just shows how out of touch I am. But let's just say like Nicki Minaj. Oh, Nicki Minaj has this great track. It just dropped. Yeah, great. That's amazing. Do you actually like this music? Or are you just hoping that someone will come to your channel and give you a like, and then you'll get more stats and all this?
Well, I guess it is a kind of clickbait. You're not fake newsing in order to get views, but you are basically enthusing about things that just happen to be popular.
I know that there's some YouTubers, and I do agree with it, who kind of go, you can go two ways in YouTube. You can either say, wow, gee, this new great thing happened. It's so great. Here's how it works. And you kind of think, oh, yeah, it kind of goes from the first and then it goes to the fifth and it goes back to the first again. That's really great. But do you really like it? And then there's the other ones which are relentlessly whingy, brutal, always like whatever is popular, they go the opposite direction, this kind of binary way that you, and I totally appreciate that too. For me, it has to be justified. So, I mean, now that said, I have made one or two videos when I started that, looking back, to me aren't justified, where I kind of didn't really, I made a couple of decisions about including bits of content that I slagged off, which looking back I would never do now. Yeah. But that's more just, I think, me just not really knowing what I was doing. But yeah, it has to be valid, and you have to actually believe in what you're saying, and be fair in your criticism. And also make sure that the targets you're hitting are people who are in the public eye themselves and who are probably putting an idea out into the public to be discussed. Lay off people who are just having a bit of fun and
that's true.
Covering the song on the internet. And that's in particular where I've gone wrong, I think, in the past. But anyway.
We'll circle back to YouTube in a little bit and your playing and your bands and so forth in shortly. I want to go right back as far as we possibly can to the first musical experience that you remember. Can we talk about the first time you either remember playing music or experiencing music and realizing that actually this could be a bigger part of your life than just something you casually enjoy? How do we get from that point to whatever your first thing in professional music is?
There's a couple of saved memories that I have. Well, I mean, there's also a couple of stories. I mean, one of my uncles apparently heard me sing the Coronation Street theme when I was a kid, when I was a tiny little baby, and I was going, na, 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 na. And he went, oh, that's the Coronation Street theme. That kid's got talent. He can pick up a tune. You should really teach him music, and you should get him violin lessons. My parents, they weren't musicians themselves. My mom actually was a singer in a choir. I'll get to that. But they didn't play anything. And they then sent me for violin lessons, and just being a little bit temperamental as a kid, I really didn't like, or I just didn't enjoy being screeched at while playing scales.
It's such an unforgiving instrument to start a kid on. My very first one was violin as well, and I hated how it sounded. I hated how my hands felt. I was like, why didn't you just give me a piano?
I mean, let's not get into the whole this whole discussion about how kids can be turned off music their entire lives based on a year or two of bad lessons they get from a teacher. And also, each kid is different. Like I loved drawing things and I loved creating things and I liked getting results, because I guess kids don't really want to put in, well, at least me as a kid, I didn't want to put in a gigantic amount of effort, and I didn't understand this concept of put in the work and in a couple of years you'll see results. So I just didn't like it. I was going to this place to do these scales that didn't make any sense to me, and I hated it. And I told my parents, I don't want to do this anymore. And they said, okay. So fast forward a couple of years, and I was definitely, at that point, I was really into draftsmanship and drawing, and very much into, I suppose, English and reading and all this kind of stuff. Definitely that kind of person in school. And then I began to get more interested in music towards the age of about 10, 12, mainly because my mom would bring me to see Beethoven a lot. She's a Beethoven fanatic, and she'd bring me to see the Fifth, and she'd bring me to see the Ninth every single time it came to the the concert hall in Limerick, which incidentally is a brilliant concert hall, a really modern one. And it's really terrible that so few things ever come there. But I saw the Rite of Spring in the concert hall. I saw so many of the great pieces of repertoire in the concert hall in Limerick. So I saw a lot of that, and I also noticed my mom's kind of amazement and how she'd be stunned after each one of these performances. And I really enjoyed it. I loved all the drama and everything of the big crescendos, especially in the Ninth towards the end. But I didn't quite, and I'd look at her and I kind of see the reaction that she'd have, and I kind of go, oh my God, she's blown over by this. And that kind of that stuck with me a little bit. And then, it's so cliched, it's just embarrassing, but I'm a kid of the 90s, right? And grunge was a thing of the 90s, and I still like a lot of the grunge bands. But Nirvana were the one that spoke to me the most, mainly because even though I was a kid of the 90s, I wish I'd been a kid of the 80s so that I could have actually seen any of these bands. But I literally heard about Nirvana the week that Kurt Cobain died. I just heard Smells Like Teen Spirit that week, and then the guy who showed me went, oh, that singer I showed you the other day, he died. And of course that just, for me was just laser focused me on this one story, which I just thought was fantastic and amazing. And did I say fantastic? I mean compelling, and brutal, and spoke to me a lot. And then I just picked up guitar. I asked my dad, could I have one? He got me an acoustic, and he said, you can learn to play electric I'll get you lessons for the acoustic guitar once you can play, I think it was 8 or 9 chords. So I sat down and I started learning these chords, and it seemed like a fair enough transaction. It was a good idea, I think. And then I heard, and then I kind of semi gave up. I sort of played a little bit. And then a couple of weeks later, we went to Dublin. We met a couple of my friends in Dublin, and one of them had a guitar, and he was really good. And he played Smells Like Teen Spirit on an electric guitar, and then let me have a go and showed me how to finger the bar chords for it. And that was it. That was the thing that made me take off, because I could do it. And the electric guitar sounded absolutely amazing to me. I couldn't believe how amazing it sounded. And I was like, right, yeah, let's get the chords out of the way. Let's get some lessons out of the way. Let's do a summer job and let's save up for an electric guitar. And that was the vision. And from there, really, I never really looked back. And like within a year, I was writing my own songs and, all that kind of stuff that people do. So maybe about 11, 12. Was also very much into recording. Actually, even earlier than that, I was very much into recording on cassette player and doing. We couldn't do multi-track, but we could do crazy stuff with the single-track recorder that we had by just half holding down the record button. So I used to do a lot of sonic experiments, I guess, like that as well. So maybe the writing was on the wall, maybe even earlier than 11. But yeah, so that kind of hodgepodge of different stories is sort of how I got started.
Wicked. In our email back and forth, you very strongly wanted to talk about failure. You seem to be quite an advocate of getting things wrong, and my day job is in music education, and we have a lot of conversations about like, yeah, I know you tried to play that song, and I know it went horribly wrong. I'm not going to lie to you, but actually, now that you've done the horrible version, you can get it out of the way and you can move forward. So, yeah, I just want to talk about your experiences with failure, and I guess crucially, how you turn a failure into a success. How can you build upon getting things wrong?
I mentioned failure because last night, what was it, 2 nights ago, I just had it just occurred to me that it was an interesting topic to discuss. It's interesting you brought up an aspect of it that I didn't even think of, which of course is, you have to fail at a piece. If you're learning skills, you need to fail a whole bunch of times before you get good at it, and that's kind of how you learn, of course. And I guess that's just true on a macro level. When it comes to your career or big goals that you set yourself and everything. I guess I wanted to talk about failure because I think it's linked to YouTube a little bit. At least it is for me, because my goal once I started getting into music properly was to finish art college, which I decided I'd do. I'd go to art college, I'd study graphic design because that's what I wanted to do. But I was in a band, and I had been in a band for about 10 years. And for me, the band was the reason why I didn't need to go and study music, because I had that. And the plan was, right, the band, I should also mention that we had a local scene, which was a sort of a DIY punk scene, which we just happened to have an enormous amount of talent in the scene, like organizational talent. And they brought big bands, like they brought Fugazi to our hometown, for example. And they brought big bands over to Limerick, and then people in Limerick got to support them. And then we got to experience what it's like to play to 300 people. We got to experience what it's like to be lifted up in the air and thrown around the place, to a crowd that's going wild and all this, even though we ourselves could barely play our instruments. And that's a big motivator. And that set me off definitely down the track of, well, I know we're good enough. I just know we don't have the skills, we don't have the money, we don't have the marketing, and we definitely don't have the time because we're all in university. So let's finish university. There was 3 of us, and then what I used to say is we'll go pro. And we did. I did anyway. Definitely went pro, as in I didn't take up the job in graphic design that I was offered. I started doing sound engineering in the local venues. I started doing odd jobs here and there, anything I could to do with music, and I started scraping together money in order to finance our band. And looking back, we had no money at all. Like, we couldn't afford a van, we couldn't afford new amplifiers. Everything was a total nightmare if it broke to try and replace. And absolute disinterest in our country, and I think across the world, because Napster had just landed, and that obviously tore up the assumptions we had, which were, we didn't realize it tore it up, but it basically removed the entire concept of, if you get albums in a shop, then people will buy the albums. We managed to get albums in a shop all over the country, but they never got bought. Because people just, suddenly this online thing took over, and they probably wouldn't have got bought anyway, but it might have got a little bit, enough to give us money to buy a van or something. But so then just the writing was on the wall after a couple of years. Even though we got really good, and even though I learned an enormous amount doing this, especially in terms of marketing. Social media was something I just did not get and did not understand, especially like MySpace at the time was the way that you went. And the thing just eventually imploded, and it was really, really upsetting to me and upsetting to the other band members who were my best friends and still are. And then I said, okay, well, I don't know what to do. I'm going to have to go to London. We just can't keep going like this because we have no money and we have no way of even touring. We lose money touring, or just about lose money touring. It was unsustainable. And my plan was, okay, well, I think we need money. And in order to get money, I have a pretty decent degree. There's a lot of money in London. Why don't we all move to London to be musicians? And that's when the other guys kind of went, well, we're not too interested in moving to London. So I found myself going to London, without any band and leaving behind all the people that I knew. And that's when I had to form like a whole new plan, which was I can read music kind of, so let's study piano from grade 0 to grade 8, and then after that learn composition, and then after that apply for a master's in university, and let's just go that route, And it was just, and it's all born of the failure of the first band, which was as I said, very emotionally kind of upsetting for me, and because it was what I wanted to do. Incidentally, the first job I had in London was in an advertising firm, which I couldn't have chosen a place more distinctly different from where I'd come from, where people are sort of honest, and when we approach things critically, and when when we see something that's BS, we're honest about it, and we look for emotional authenticity. And then you go into an advertising firm where they ask you to animate a Pringles can, and that was a pretty horrible. That was one of the other driving motivators. I was like, I cannot live in this world. This cannot be what I do with my life, and so I guess that's my big failure story, I suppose, and I guess I don't know where I'm going at the moment, but I wouldn't imagine I would call anything I've done recently a failure. Like, I've maybe hasn't reached the gigantic heights of being the next Britney Spears, but I've got this through line now. I'm going to run with it and see where it goes.
It is interesting how, as you say, Napster just kind of appeared, completely, largely overhauled the music industry in a way that people working in music on I guess we say on the ground level didn't know what to do. It's something that music is so digital these days. It's so hard to imagine a time before that, or even a time when it just comes in and just completely screws your life up, I guess, in a way.
It's weird. It's weird, especially when you consider the time itself, which we didn't realize was a time of optimism.
Man.
And there might have been some money in people scouting and looking for bands and trying to find interesting music out there, and that just didn't, Napster put paid to that. Although, not to be completely 100% pessimistic, it is really nice to know that those scumbags who charged $29.99 for a CD, which cost them about maybe 12p to make for a reproduced CD, that they weren't able to do that anymore. So that was a disgrace, and I'm glad that was stop was put to that.
If you're enjoying this interview, you might want to visit the LTGuitarist Ko-fi page. Ko-fi, spelt Ko-fi, is a platform where people like you can buy a coffee for their favourite internet creators. Precious coffee. There's also a store where you can download basically every piece of music I've ever written, including lots of stuff that isn't up on Spotify or anywhere else. There's also a monthly supporter option where if you want to send me £1 every month, you can unlock a bunch of sample packs by me, which are not available anywhere else. It's super easy to set up and you can send payment through PayPal. Honestly, times are hard, so any donations are hugely appreciated. Visit kofi.com/LTGuitarist. That's ko-fi.com/LTGuitarist to support the LT Guitarist Interviews podcast. Thank you. How do we get from the moving to London, the advertising firm? How do you get from there to your first YouTube upload?
Okay, well, I was working in advertising, wasn't too fond of that. I realized that, with the emergence of applications and the iPhone and Facebook and all this, there was a lot of money in software. And I liked designing software, so I moved into that. Then that kind of gave me a bit of finance, and that allowed me to start studying music with any free time that I had. So I studied all the grades for piano, studied all the grades for music theory, then studied with the composition professor who owns his own school of music, which is actually doing really well now. His name is Juan Rizzuto. Shout out to Juan. Thanks for teaching me some basic stuff about composition and then some advanced stuff later on. After that, then I just started applying for conservatoires, and I got accepted for a master's course in the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, which is the RCS for short, in Glasgow, and that was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. I studied under the composition professor Gordon McPherson. They really emphasised the individuality of composers coming in there, and it was really the right fit for me, that place. I got on very well with Gordon, still do. And Then after that, myself and my wife decided, once I got my degree, we decided, we actually, this was part of the big plan that I had, which was, right, get the degree. And then the second you get the degree, we have to have kids because we're not getting any younger. And she was waiting for me to finish this course. We actually got married, I think, the week before I started the course. I had kids directly after I got my degree. Kids, I say kids because it turned out to be twins. And twins are a lot of work. I knew that I couldn't just go globetrotting and getting performances all the time. So I had to kind of rein it in. With twins, I had to adjust because twins are a whole different kettle of fish. One person just cannot, when they're young, look after them by themselves. Maybe some people can, but we totally couldn't. They're very mild. I don't want to be alarming. They had some health issues, and it required us to be there with them most of the time together. Two people. So going to rehearsals, going abroad, skiving off, and just doing whatever I wanted was out of the question. And I just thought, okay, well, what can I do in the meantime? And I thought, well, I'd like to study. When the kids get a bit older, then I can maybe get back out there again, and I'll do whatever. I'll do performances, and rehearsals as much as I possibly can. But maybe if I study a bit, then maybe I'll be even better as a composer. And a little boring just sitting there reading theory when I can't apply it and practice it. So I thought of the YouTube channel because I was a really big fan of Red Letter Media. You know those guys? Loved the Plinkett reviews of Star Wars because they're really informative, really kind of well made, and really funny, and blisteringly. Not blisteringly unfair, but a little deliberately unfair in places, and just really, really funny. And I loved how technically they broke down all the shots and everything, and how they pointed out the illogic of the movie. And I just thought, wow, YouTube can do long form comedy criticism that's more complicated than anything you'd see in mainstream media. And I thought, sounds perfect for a music channel. So I thought. At the time, I thought of myself as I want to be kind of like the Red Letter Media of music, except I don't want to do exactly what they're doing. I want to talk about music in a structured way, but I also want to inject a bit of my own personality and humor into it. And also, I have an animation background and a bit of a film background, and I want to kind of make use of those skills too. And I just started by doing a composition tutorial, and that was okay. And I threw in a couple of jokes. It was a bit wooden. And I kind of thought, okay, this is going well, and released that. Got, like you say, a couple of hundred views. And then I started the whole, I'm going to post my own stuff on Reddit. Oh, Reddit doesn't like when I do that. Oh, this is actually hard. It's hard to get your stuff out there.
Reddit will make you feel like a failure. And not in a constructive way.
Oh, God, there is an art to Reddit. You want to talk about failure, talk about trying to post stuff on Reddit.
Oh, my God.
If it's your own. Yeah, that's a dark art, right? Trying to get your stuff on Reddit. It's funny when you release something on Reddit, and if it does well, the Reddit comments are more cantankerous than the YouTube comments, which is quite funny.
I've had some success with Reddit, but for every success I've had some many painful comments. Just there's something about Reddit users; they know exactly what to say to really hurt you deeply.
What kind of comments hurt you? That's an interesting. What particular brand of criticism gets your goat?
You'll always get things where actually in this measure you refers to this note as this note, when actually I think you'll find it's this note. And I actually don't care that much.
That's actually those are the kind of criticisms I'm glad I get, because I've been known to. I've definitely made a couple of mistakes in previous videos where I kind of go, you know the ones I'm talking about where you said the wrong inversion of this chord and someone will call you out on it. And then it kind of takes the sweet feeling away from the video when you know you got an error you can't correct or edit out.
But what I found about music theory and interpretations of music is actually a lot of it is interpretation, and there's a million different ways to say different things. I can't remember what the video I did recently was, but I think I made the point that a pair of notes, if you're a guitarist, you'd call any pair of notes either a power chord or a double stop, even though we know technically a power chord is a root and a five, and you can have any number of roots and any number of fives, but a power chord is that. But blues musicians will call it a double stop, and a double stop is something that comes from traditional violin string instruments. But actually the most correct word to describe any pair of notes is a dyad, but I never use that word because I'm a guitar player. So even though there are technically correct ways of saying things in music theory, a lot of it is about perspective and interpretation, and ultimately it's all based on what some dudes in togas said a very long time ago. So maybe we should alter some of the language these days, maybe. But then Reddit doesn't like that either.
YouTube definitely shows up the lack of standardization with the names of certain things across the different genres. Yeah, that one, I've actually come across that one as well. People going, "Hey, no, it's a double stop." What are you talking about? And like, but those ones are just like, that's the name of this thing. It's if you get the theory wrong, the actual, if you're describing a phenomenon that isn't actually correct, or if you get the science behind it incorrect, that's a real problem. I've done one or two of those as well, by the way. I think we all have. Or it's usually just misnaming a chord or something. The comments that bother me the most are the ones where people go, "You've been really mean unfairly to a person who didn't deserve it." Those ones really get me, and I kind of go, "Oh God." There was one video where I just sort of I used an example for a joke of a student doing some sonification. It was really crap, by the way. It was really, it was really hard not to. But it didn't even occur to me. I just sort of thought, here's a person who's released something on YouTube, glowing about this sonification technique they've used, and I was thinking, so unoriginal. It's been done so many times. I'm so sick of this. It's the whole climate change thing. I'm going to take data from climate change, and I'm going to convert the data into some notes, and then I'm going to get musicians to play it. It's the music of climate change. And you kind of think, it's like such a irritating sort of emotional manipulation, and I sort of thinking, God, and I just kind of used it as a minor example. I didn't actually criticize it too much. I just kind of showed it, and one person just really took exception to that. Went, you're just attacking some fresher in university, who's really not thought this through. And when I look back at it, I was thinking, oh God, I can't really defend myself there. That person's right. And then then the problem there is, I would totally cut that. I would totally cut a whole bunch of, maybe 3 or 4 comments from one of my previous videos. I wouldn't say my videos are rife with this stuff, but a couple are. There's a couple of errors here and there. But I'd love to go back and just edit those out in a way that isn't really jarring and awful. Like, let me edit it out and let me go and re-upload it, but not lose all the views and not lose all the, the credit and everything. YouTube just cannot figure out how to do that. I mean, I know why. I know the ways you can game a system like that, but I think you can solve it too. And that's really frustrating,
It's interesting you bring up the sonification video. I did some work in sonification, but kind of turning visual art into sound or music or audio. And actually your video on sonification, like when you type in sonification, it's one of the things that comes up. So I watched that, and I think that was the first thing of yours I really saw. Because of your critique, it made me think actually a bit about, I'm using this software called Photo Sounder that just takes an image and turns it into sound. So it reads it left to right. The brightest bits of the image are the loudest volumes. So black is no sound, white is a lot of sound. And then it reads it left to right. So left to right is time, and then bottom to top is frequency. So I was sort of playing around with tweaking this and kind of, if I do this, I get a much nicer sound. But then watching your video, I was like, yeah, but if I'm tweaking it too much and deliberately making it sound nice, is it true to the original source material? If, where is the line? Where do I stop tweaking because it then doesn't become, it's then not true to the original source? Does that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like, there's so many avenues here. There's so many things. Like, I think it's pretty straightforward how these things can be thought about. Like, any experiment you do that produces a sound and you like that sound is completely fine. It's interesting you mentioned that there was a piece of software you used that read black and white imagery and then converted that to sound, because I just came across a piece of, it was an invention that was created in 1913, I think, called the Optophone. I just found out about this the other week, and it was something that was to aid people in being able to read books, people who were blind, and it had some crazy sort of circuitry around what looks like a microscope, and it's a big block of a thing, and you'd move it. You'd move it over a book, and it would look at the black ink against the white background. And it would be attached to a bunch of amplifiers or some pieces of circuitry that would take whatever signals they're getting and would be able to convert that into a unique type of sonified sound. And that way then that a H would sort of sound a bit different to an A, and reliably so. And then this weird sequence of sonified sounds could be learned by someone who was blind, and then that would be their way of actually reading a book, letter by letter. They just know. And this is before, maybe not before Braille, but this thing, the Optophone, actually was commercially released and was a competitor to Braille, I think, for ages. I think its day is done now, but it's an amazing idea. Just the idea of taking something visual, converting it to, abstract sounds that you then learn that actually mean something that's in the real world. And I guess to lead off from that, that's one avenue that people are interested in with sonification, which is there something we can learn about the world as it is from listening to data, from listening to it in some way, shape, or form? Convert what you have in front of you, some parameters about it. Could be like when it happened over time or changes to it over time. It could be taking visual mapping from it, from some place or other, and converting that into sound, like, for example, observing the sun or observing the stars. And sound, because our ears can pick up individual sounds from background noise a whole lot better than our eyes can, sometimes has been found to pick out interesting sort of patterns in data that then, further science or further discovery in some sense or other.
Yeah, because we're tuned to sort of hear rhythms and patterns, aren't we? So if you notice a pattern in pitch or a pattern in rhythm, that's an indication, this specific area of data is something to look further in at. Sort of zoom in on.
Just another tool in a scientist's work belt that helps them to figure out what things are and how things are working, and that's really practical. And then I think, like what you were doing, I mean, to me, what you were doing sounds fine. I was messing around with some stuff to get a sound. What bothers me in the video, and I think my only reluctance or my only misgiving about that video was, I don't think I stated it clearly enough, was I can't stand when people take data from something, make music from it, and then go and make that the program note afterwards and go, hey, I took data from the Israel-Palestine conflict and I converted it into sound. And of course, as we all know, the conversion process, you can make it whatever you want. Like, you can make it the happiest, trippiest thing ever. You can make it the saddest, most desolate thing ever.
If you put it into the Phrygian dominant mode, it's going to sound like you're in a desert somewhere. It's so easy.
So you can just manipulate the data, and it basically means that you didn't even need the data to begin with. And then you got your program note right out of the can, Israel-Palestine conflict, and I've written some music. Listen to it. Oh, da, 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 da. And you go, it's so desolate and horrible. Really, it's interesting the way the data brings forth these eerie sounds that really, it's all connected in some weird way. There is a God. And I think that's what drives me insane.
It's just, it's clickbait again, really, isn't it? It's the sort of thing that, like...
It's kind of clickbait. Yeah, it's clickbait. It's just a lie.
It's the sort of thing that kind of... I'm just going to be really brutal. Lonely people who listen to Radio Forward really love, Israel-Palestine sounds like this. It's really gloomy. No, it doesn't.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean by Radio 4. That's actually one place I heard it before. I remember Radio 4 used to do this. A scientist has looked into space, and he's taken the data from some stars, and he's converted those data into music, and now you can hear the sounds of the celestial heavens. Ting-ling-ling, chink, 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 chink. Loads of wind chimes and everything. And I listened to it kind of going, what if you chose tubas? What if you chose vuvuzelas? Would it sound... Why did you choose that particular sound? Is it because we have a bias about what the heavens might sound like? Yeah, come on. Give me a break.
If you put death metal on a glockenspiel, it's going to sound like space.
Like one of those really short Slayer songs. Or just like three seconds of Slayer represents every single time a star twinkles in the sky. How's that going to sound? But they always choose wind chimes.